Conversations across time. Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Okay, so last week, if you watched the show, you know that we talked about organized labor. That's what this series is about. And so now this is the second part of a three-part conversation. And in this episode, in this segment, what we're talking about now is obviously the overall theme: could organized labor exist in today's political and economic climate? And so now we want to talk about labor. We want to talk about labor and politics and how there's been an interplay and an interaction with organized labor and politics. So I'm going to start with our first guest who was with us last week, Mr.
Hi.
Debs.
Hi, my name's Eugene Victor Debs. I'm a social democrat, a union organizer. I organized the Industrial Workers of the World, which is also known as the Wobbly. It's an industrial union. It is for all workers. I also ran for president 5 times as the candidate of the Socialist Party of the United States. In 1920, have been put in prison in Atlanta, Georgia for protesting United States entry into the capitalistic, imperialistic World War I ran for president from my prison cell, and I received almost 4% of the popular vote.
Good evening. I am Samuel Gompers. For approximately 40 years, from the mid-1880s to my passing in 1924, I was the president of the American Federation of Labor, which was at that time the premier labor federation in the United States, organizing dozens of craft unions into one big federation. And I have always advocated for political action and legislative action to have our laws written more favorably to working people without regard to party. My motto has always been, reward your friends, punish your enemies.
Hi, I'm Ronald Reagan, 40th President of the United States. I served 2 very successful terms of president from 1981 to 1989. Labor played a major role in a portion of my presidency, and we're going to discuss it today at length. Prior to the time that I became president of the United States, I was governor of California. And before that, I was the head of the Screen Actors Guild, a union, an organization that represented the actors in Hollywood. And I fought for the rank and file of that union as much as I fought for the people of the United States when I was president. The issue of politics and the unions will be discussed in this lively half hour that we have ahead of us. And I'm eager to get involved in the discussion. Thank you.
Now, it's interesting that President Reagan has characterized this as lively because, as I said, if you tuned in last week, we had an animated discussion about organized labor. But what I want to do is I want to ask Mr. Debs if you can, because you didn't initially think politics was the way to go. Can you explain what changed you?
Well, I saw certain gains, especially as we started to organize and we started to get more people at the polls. However, I still believe, and as I look at your economy now, that it would be very difficult for the working people to be able to get the things they need for protection and at a fair share just by using politics, because the capitalistic class, the owners of the business, have been able, through money and through Supreme Court decisions in your time, been able to control the amount of money that goes into politics and to control the thoughts of the people. So there is propaganda that they throw out, and President Reagan, even before this time, throws out the word socialistic communist to disparage any type of worker organization that wants to move towards improving the status of the working class. And as I look at your current economy, I see the same type of exploitation that we saw during the period of the robber barons and up until my death in the early 20s. The accumulation of wealth on the top and the exploitation of workers on the bottom. And even more now, we see in your economy a wide gap between the super rich and the working poor. And that's a term that there should never be in any type of discussion about the United States of America, which can be a great country. There should never be a term called working poor. If you work, you should never be poor.
Mr. Gompers, let me ask you this. And I'm sorry, President Reagan, I'll come right back to you, but I want to ask Mr. Gompers, because you started with labor organization as someone working out of a tenement apartment, rolling cigars.
Yes, that's true. That's how when I was a kid, I immigrated with my parents and my 10 brothers and sisters in a tenement in New York. That's where we lived, in a tenement. And our job was to roll cigars.
But were your parents active in politics? I mean, that's what I'm trying to, what shaped you to decide that as a union person that politics was important?
Well, in the mid 1880s, the New York State Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal for the state government to try to regulate the tenement labor. Like, then there was plenty of tenement labor in my era. I mean, people weren't, there were sweatshops in the tenements, like with girls sewing dresses and other clothes in these tenements, and all kind of manufacturing in the tenements, and the tenements themselves were very hazardous and unsafe, and the state Supreme Court ruled that was acceptable, and it convinced me that we of the labor movement in the AFL must pay attention to politics, have our people elected to public office so they could join legislatures and draft laws so that the laws can be more favorable to working people. And of
now,
course,
I want to interrupt you for a second right there, because President Reagan was getting ready to say something. And I want to know if he had a response or a reaction to the conditions that Mr. Gompers just described.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that labor unions played a terrific role in helping the worker work under better working conditions. We look around today, there are no sweatshops today. Sure, there are people that aren't making as much as they should be making, but by collective bargaining, they could raise that. That's not necessarily, when you talk about labor and politics, I mean, the labor, there's nothing wrong with the labor movement. There's nothing wrong with collective bargaining. The problem was that the unions moved away from that. They got involved in, just look at the union situation in Philadelphia during my time and right after my time with the roofers union and the Teamsters union, where they strong-armed people to get their way rather than bargain collectively, to the point where the federal government had to come in and take the union over in both instances. They would burn buildings down if non-union workers were working in that building, rather than try and persuade the owners of that building to put on union people.
Mr. Debs just signaled. I can see his eyebrows raised.
Well, he
Mr.
was in jail for that.
Because he talks about the abuse of labor, and he doesn't mention the abuse of the capitalistic classes. Where was Mr. Reagan when troops were called out all the time to end strikes, even in his early youth?
Well, riots, yeah, sure.
He was a supporter of that. He was a New Deal supporter. So all of a sudden now he's yelling about some roofers union in the city of Philadelphia trying to fight for their workers and get a fair share of the wealth of this nation for the roofers and the people that make this economy work. And he doesn't talk about the abuses the capitalistic class inflicts upon us workers. And that's the whole point. They divide us, they abuse us. And Mr. Reagan made a statement. I almost fell off my chair here. He said,
I saw you.
He said there are no more sweatshops. Mr. Reagan, I wish you were alive, and I wish I was alive in 2021, and we can tour some of these neighborhoods where there are still sweatshops. There's still people working on piecework, which is what Mr. Gompers was alluding to. He got paid by how many cigars he and his father and mother rolled. People were
most of the capitalists moved all those companies out of the country. There's no sweatshops here in this country. They may be in the Dominican Republic or in Vietnam or someplace else. That's what the capitalists did. That's what they did to the workers. They moved everything out of here. So they would have stayed here, if they were able to.
But President Reagan, there's still sweatshops, and I'm talking about the workers of the entire world, and that's what I've been preaching my whole life. We all work, and we all have to stick together, and that will be the salvation of the working class. And the capitalistic class all over the world sticks together.
I'm concerned about America. That's what I'm concerned about. I was the president of the United States of America, not of the world. And that's what I'm concerned about. And what happened Reagan, with
I don't want to give you a course in economics here, but I'm sure you were happy that consumers in the United States, when your economy was booming, could buy Japanese cars at a much lower price than General Motors cars because they were produced by labor that was cheaper in Japan at the time. And I'm sure that the concept of a sweatshop is universal. It doesn't have to be only in the United States. And unless, as workers, we acknowledge that we have to defend workers all over the world, women all over the world, that there will be no salvation. We will always be oppressed.
I have to defend the people of the United States. I'm sorry, as president of the United States, that's what I have to do. The rest of the world, yeah, there's a problem around the world. Those countries have to take care of their problems.
But
yes.
but that's a very isolationist point of view. And what's interesting is that one could say that Mr. Gompers, who in fact was in favor of and agreed with President Wilson and the whole notion of labor having a more than comfortable, a relationship that was more comfortable than Mr. Debs would have liked, but having a relationship with capitalists that historically we have some questions about it. And I guess what Mr. Debs was just alluding to is that President Reagan, that's the paintbrush that you've been painted with. I mean, and we'll talk about that next week, but I do want us to zero in on how organized labor from the time of Mr. Gompers and Mr. Debs had morphed into becoming this political force. I mean, maybe not so much today. Of course, you gentlemen are all deceased, but I can tell you in this day and time, there's a belief and a feeling amongst most people that labor doesn't have the kind of leverage that it had. But back to our overall theme, is that can organized labor emerge? Can it exist in this political climate? So having someone who's supportive of politicians in Mr. Gompers, and someone who was supportive of politics in Mr. Debs, it's interesting in terms of where that's morphed to today. But organized labor has certainly had a part. I mean, it certainly played a function in political elections. Mr. Debs?
When of course I was dead, but when the unions, after World War II, when the unions were empowered by the shortage of labor, people coming back, a booming economy, the merger of Mr. Gomper's union with the industrial union, labor had a big say in politics. It no longer has that kind of say. I believe only 6% of the American people are union members in non-government unions.
At this present time.
At the present time that you guys are living in.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about politics, and Mr. Reagan said he only worries about the United States. I went to jail because I told the American workers who were being drafted not to register for the draft and go fight in World War I, because it was only a capitalistic war to expand capitalism, to give resources to countries that didn't need any more resources. And I didn't see any sense of our workers killing German workers or Austrian workers or any other workers for the benefit of the capitalistic class. And I was called a traitor by President Wilson. I was sentenced to 10 years in prison under the Espionage Act. And I would do it again, and I would serve my prison time again. If I'm in prison, all humans, all workers are prisoners till every worker is free. So I say that we live in you live in a more global economy than I lived in, and we have to organize all workers. And in my opinion, there is no way the capitalistic class, and you have examples of the greedy people who own the businesses and the stockholders currently in the United States, there's no way they're going to give workers any rights or any money unless we demand it and we all stick together.
Yes.
Well, that's very idealistic, and that's the way labor unions started, and they did a good job. But labor unions have to look inward and see the excesses that they caused that created the situation where only 6% of the people are members of a labor union in this country. Now, there are a lot of...
I must point out, Mr. Reagan.
Please, Mr. Gompers,
Mr. What? Yes?
No, I'm saying please address that, because that's that statement is very incendiary.
Yeah, yes, it is. I mean, there's nothing wrong with organized workers being active in politics. I mean, you and the rest of the capitalist press, I know you're with me on this, Gene, have always been propagandizing unions as communists and gangsters and thugs. In the capitalist media machine, you've always done that. But you never say anything positive about what unions do. I mean, they never say that union workers are way better paid. They stick to the job way longer, and they have benefits like health care and vacations so they can spend time with wife and kids. And they do charitable work in the community. I've seen unions organize food drives and COVID-19 vaccine clinics for the community. But no, all you see is all the propaganda of thugs and communists, etc. I am
You're
sick
talking
of it.
about
That's why we have to organize our own systems so that we can counteract you. Is with your capitalist classmates, you're the front man. That's all you are, just a front man, just an actor. You just read the script and you run with it.
Oh my, that's
Listen.
the true shade. That's true shade.
You're talking about past history. There was no
I'm talking about
question.
today.
I agree that the unions did a terrific job in helping the worker and having them make more money and helping their working conditions. But you're just looking at the past. You have to look at the present. You have to look at where the economy is now.
And we
There are
already
no
know where the
assembly lines in
economy
the
is.
United States anymore that fostered all these unions.
It's
And the
because-
abuses that the unions played on the public in overreaching after you were all dead. But the unions were way overboard in demanding things and using force
There's
to do
nothing
it.
wrong with workers
illegal
coming together
acts.
for us to
Well.
demand our rights. And I hopefully Sam, Gene, you're with me on this. Hopefully our successors in the movement pick up where we leave off.
Mr.
Who
Reagan,
are the successors of the movement?
Mr.
Who are they?
Reagan,
Where are they?
Mr. Reagan spouts
They
the
have no
same.
political power anymore, none. And it's because of the abuses that they
What
perpetrated on
Okay,
the.
President Reagan.
Look, it started
Can we
during
just-
my
Can we
administration
just,
with the
can
air
we just
traffic
let Mr.
controllers.
Depp respond to your very heated exchange with Mr. Gompers?
All
Mr.
due,
Debbs.
all due respect, President Reagan, you are spouting the same propaganda that the capitalist class wants you to spout, that they've been spouting since the Industrial Revolution, the last 150 years. The abuse of labor. You guys are the most abusive class that ever existed on the earth.
Here, Sam.
And for you to talk about the abuse of labor unions is the silliest thing I've ever heard. You have companies now where the major stockholder is worth billions and billions of dollars, and he pays zero taxes when the average worker in his factory or in his warehouse, I won't say factory because he doesn't have any, he doesn't produce anything, in his warehouse where they distribute things, pays more in 1 month in taxes than he pays in an entire year, and he's a billionaire. And you talk about abuse of labor unions, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Yes, I must point out.
If I
that,
may, if I may,
all right.
if you want to cure, and I agree with you. I mean, I believe that CEOs today make way more money than they're entitled to. But it's the job, not of the labor unions, because they don't have any power anymore. It's the job of the representatives of the people, the Congress, to change that, to change the tax law so that it's more beneficial if you think it's wrong. In my time, apparently they thought I was right because the people voted for me overwhelmingly in the policies that I put in place. So you can say all you want to say about politics and power, but I was the one that was in power.
Well, you can't.
I was the one that had the ear of the average person in the United States.
Mr.
May I point out, Mr. Reagan, your favorite mantra, your favorite tagline has always been, government isn't the solution, government is the problem. And you've done everything you could to undermine any ability for federal agencies to look after the well-being of consumers and workers, like OSHA. OSHA is the agencies that would protect the health and safety and well-being of workers in
EPA,
the
how about
workplace.
EPA? How about the EPA?
Yes, the EPA, that's the agency for
Environmental Protection Agency.
to protect the environment. And you weakened it so as to make it easier for corporations to dump their sewage and their chemicals into the air, into the water, into the land. And that's your small government. And here's another thing, before you're notorious for whining about welfare queens. You have these corporate CEOs. They screw up the company, and for that thousands of their workers have to be fired. But the former CEO doesn't have to worry about it because he gets $10 million
He gets
Just to kick him out,
what they
the golden
call
parachute,
he
just-
gets what they call now a golden parachute.
That's
But
right.
I want to go back to something, and I want Mr. Debs to comment on this, because President Reagan said it's up to the people to elect representatives that support their issues, that we can't expect organized labor to do it. But I want to ask you this, and maybe I'm all wet, maybe I'm wrong about this, but how does President Reagan, how does he advance a theory about politicians and elected officials, that the people should go to elected officials, when in fact the corporations own the elected officials, the lobbyists own the elected officials? Mr. Debs?
Not only that, they want to suppress the vote of the working and the class. If you really wanted to have a participatory democracy, you would have election day a paid holiday. If you really wanted participatory democracy, that will never happen, and President Reagan will be the first to stomp his foot on that. So please don't come with this capitalistic rhetoric that we've been hearing for the last 150 years about the workers are scum, and they're bad, and they're with gangsters, and they abuse their power, when all of the corporate executives are more abusive. They don't care if people die. They don't care if people are hungry. They don't care if people are evicted from their homes. And that's why the workers have to unite in one giant union. We work and you guys don't. We create the wealth and you want to keep it all for yourself.
Now I'm going to ask.
I was the most empathetic president of all time.
Okay, now on that note, I'm going to throw to Mr. Gompers and let Mr. Gompers wrap us up, because believe it or not, we are at the end of another episode, and I promised this was going to be fun. I'm having a ball. This has been great, Mr. Gompers.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Reagan, I don't usually agree with Eugene, but he has a point. If people are not allowed to vote or express themselves, please don't think that they're just going to put up with it and just skulk quietly and endure it. No, if they're not allowed to vote so as to change the conditions of their communities and their lives, guess what? They'll find some other way to express themselves.
Okay,
I mean,
Gompers,
the Black
Mr.
Lives
Gompers.
Matter demonstrations will be a picnic compared to what happens if you don't let us vote.
Mr. Gompers,
Nothing to laugh about, Mr. Reagan.
Mr. Gompers is fired up. This is a good place for us to end, because next week we have the same group. We have the same gentleman coming back, Mr. Gompers, President Reagan, and Mr. Debs. They are coming back next week. And believe it or not, next week's topic, we're still talking about, can organized labor exist in today's political and economic climate? But next week's topic is, what the hell happened to Ronnie? Look forward to it. We'll see you next week. I'm Vivienne Crawford on behalf of Conversations Across Time. Good night. I hope you enjoyed it.
Conversation across the town. Conversation across town. Conversation across.